Hello.
What's up, guys?
Hey.
Happy Canada Day.
Yeah.
Happy. That's it. That's right. Happy Canada Day indeed. Welcome everyone to the Mack Flash music. This episode we're going to be celebrating our country, which is Canada. Right now, people aren't happy with our country, and there's a lot of crappy stuff going on, but I will say that I still love my country, and one of the great things about this country is its people. And so today we are going to talk about some Canadian people, and those people happen to be musicians because this show is about music. And so we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite Canadian artists. So first of all, my name is Andrew. Over here is Scott, and down there is Jim. And we are going to list off our favorite Canadian artists, starting with our 5 and go to 1. And we're going to throw in some honorable mentions in there. Guys, are we ready to get started?
Absolutely, man. This is going to be awesome. There's a ton. I used to work in radio for 10 years, and just the influx in the last decade of like Canadian pop music, Canadian rock, all that. There's hundreds, man. This is a good category.
My salute's going to be more of a throwback, but definitely Scott's right. You can honor a whole bunch from recent. You can honor a whole bunch from the past. But Canada has a surprising impact on the music and music world in general.
I will sadly say that although there are a ton of Canadian bands that I like, there are no real. When I was going through the list, I was like, "There's no real Canadian bands that I love." So my top 5 are 5 bands that I really like a lot. But there wasn't anything there that I was like, surprisingly, I don't love. But like these guys have said, there are a ton of bands that I like. There are we have given the world a ton of music over the years, and we're going to highlight some of that. I'm going to start with my number 5, and before I dip into tell you who my number 5 is, I'm going to tell you a little story about how I discovered that band. And this is a band, admittedly, that I don't listen to that much anymore. I haven't listened to a lot since high school, but they're on this list because of their influence on my musical tastes and on my life in general. So this is a band that I discovered kind of by accident, and it was when I was about 12 years old. I was on March break with my mom, and we were visiting my grandparents in Hamilton, and one of the things we like to do when we're there is to go to the thrift shops. And so I wanted to go there for records and cassettes. And so that was what I did. And so I was going through the cassettes, and there was one cassette that was, it didn't have a sleeve in it. There's no sleeve in it. It was just the plastic case and the cassette itself. And so I'm looking at this thing, and between the case and the cassette itself, it was gnarly. Like there was like cigarette burns in it. There was like bubble gum like stuck on it. It was gnarly looking, and I would like that kind of intrigued me already. Just the fact that it was like I was like, man, this tape has seen some stuff, right? And so I looked at the title and I looked at the band, and I was like, oh man, that sounds interesting. So I think I paid like 50 cents for it or whatever, and I get it to my grandparents' house, and I had at the time I had this really long rectangle ghetto blaster that was about this thin, and it was long, and I put my headphones on and listen to my cassettes. And so I put the cassette in and I press play, and I'm going to play for you guys what so the tape wasn't all the way to the start of the cassette. It was right in the middle of like one of the sides. So I put it in, and then I'm going to play for you guys what I heard. And so I'm listening to this, and it starts getting like super creepy. And I'm like, what is this? And so I got super scared. And so I quickly hit stop, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, I can't listen to this. This is crazy. This is too crazy. And so I stop and I go and I start watching TV. And about 5-10 minutes later, I come back, and my curiosity got the better of me. I went back and I wanted to hear some more. So I put it in, and I'm hearing this, and it's, oh my gosh, what is this? What is going on? And so I did that process about 5 or 6 times before I actually like started listening to the whole thing. And eventually it gets to a song from this. This is kind of like a atmosphere interlude between songs. Oh, I mean, it is an actual song, but like it's kind of like, it's not a song per se. Anyway, I finally get the song, and I start listening to it, and I like it. And so that cassette was called Cleanse, Fold, and Manipulate, and the band was Skinny Puppy. And so Skinny Puppy is a industrial band that started in Vancouver, Canada, and Vancouver, BC. Ooh, I'm going way too far here. And they are basically, there were 3 or 4 members. There's Sven Key, Navek Ogre, Dwayne Gotel. Later was replaced, after he passed away, it was replaced by Mark Walk. But it was basically, for the most part, just 3 guys, and then had collaborators between. And but they basically played synth instruments, drums, and a lot of drum machines. And they basically one of the pioneers of industrial music. And so I'd never heard anything like this at all, and remotely like this in my life. And so it got me really intrigued. And so in a lot of their albums and a lot of their songs, they use sound clips from movies and from TV shows and all kinds of stuff, different stuff. And so that was what really sucked me in, because at the time, even as a little kid, I watched a lot of horror movies. And so they would use a lot of horror movie sound clips and sounds from horror movies. And so the way I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, I like, as I started listening to it more, I'm like, oh, I get this. This is like horror movie music. Like this is like music that like kind of is like for horror people. And I started really liking it, especially the like recognizing the sound clips. I was like, oh, I recognize that movie. That's from that. Or that's from Suspiria. Oh man, I recognize that. And so then, as I got older, I started watching their videos, and their videos are made up of horror clips from horror movies, and different like really like scary and like horror related music videos. And so these are my top 5 albums by them. The bottom right there is the Cleanse, Fold, and Manipulate, my first one I bought. And so one of the things that also I hope you so this fun fact, that soundbite is from it's from a movie that was on one of my Mack Flash 5 lists. It's called Plague Dogs, and it was an animated movie from the 80s that was for, that little kids could watch, but it was like about animal testing and all that kind of stuff. And so that, which brings me into one of the things that really intrigued me about them as I further got into them is they are and still are big time activists. And this is during the 80s when it wasn't very popular to be an activist in certain things. And so their biggest thing that they're activists for, and I also forgot to show this bad boy. There you go. That's one of my thrift shop finds, is from when I was a kid. This is Bites. I've got a couple more there too. But one of the things, like I said, one of the things they're big on is animal rights, and they're against animal cruelty, animal testing. And so the whole album of Vivisect 6, which is what that song was from, Testure, which is my favorite of their songs, is basically the whole album is all about animal testing and cruelty towards animals. And the video for that song, Testure, is a mixture of actual footage of animals being tested on and how, like, them suffering, and then it's mixed between that and like this, like, basically a little horror film of these monsters who taken this man and are testing on him like you would an animal. And so it's really horrific, but like it's, making the point of this is what you're doing to these animals and making them suffer. And so that video was used by at the time by a lot of the animal rights groups, because of it's so disturbing and so like powerful of a video that it really got a lot of play, and it's pretty messed up.
Sure.
But like that's one of the things that I really dug about these guys, is that, and like I've talked about in previous episodes, it's not just music. Like they have a message in all their songs. There's, they're one of like the first bands I came across in the 80s that were talking about polluting the world and, corporate greed, and like basically all their songs are, have a real message to it, which I really, really dug. And so, like I said, this is not a band that is not one of my go-to bands, but basically this opened the door for me for bands that I would love, like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry and Frontline Assembly, and like all those bands that I got huge into high school, all came from the random chance of listening to Skinny Puppy and listening to Skinny Puppy. And so that's why they're my number 5.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jimmy, you ever heard of them?
What's that?
Have you ever heard of them?
No, never heard of them, but like AB said, definitely you can tell where his musical influence came from, because with that sound of a whole bunch of electronics and everything that we found, definitely Joy Division, Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, when you say Nine Inch Nails, I'm like, I don't know much about music like that, but you can definitely get that. That's the more Americanized version of that. So cool, man. Absolutely. You can probably even turn your volume up a little much. You could barely hear it on this one, just to give you a heads up.
Your
volume was pretty low. You could hear it, but you could turn it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that you just got us flagged last week, you can bring it somewhere in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my number 5 while he does that. And we're definitely going to keep it in the rock vein, but we are going to go from a little bit of like the grunge horror rock that you were discussing, and we're going to bring it a little bit more bluesy. And my number 5 might surprise you, but we're going to talk about why. It's going to be from Regina, Saskatchewan, 7-time Juno winner, Colin James.
Very cool.
Thank you. So when I was a kid, this was the jam that I would listen to with my parents, and a top down in a Mustang, you've heard me talk about. That's where a lot of my first music tastes came from. And if it wasn't the Beach Boys, and if it wasn't the Beach Boys, or if it wasn't, Tom Cochrane's Life is a Highway, which is a fun song as well too, we put on Colin James at this point. So I wanted to make sure that before I get too mainstream with my 4 to my 1, very top heavy on pop music, I wanted to bring in a little bit of rock music here as well too. So definitely the kind of rock Canadian content I'm looking at. And here's just, a number of his albums. I think to date he has about, it would be close to 15 albums. These are some of his first ones. He's definitely a kind of guy, that really hit his apex mountain in Canadian music in the 90s. And, the late 80s and 90s was definitely his peak. And you'll see here, he's got his Colin James debut album, top left, from 1988. And Sudden Stop, 1990, which is containing this song, Just Came Back, which is most certainly his most popular song. Just fun story about Colin James, too. I was actually at Canadian Music Week in Toronto in 2013. I was in Toronto, and he was being honored into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. And he played like a set of music. And I was there with my boss, with our radio station. And it was just me and him. And later on in the night, I found myself at the bar, and I don't think I knew anybody there. There's a bunch of music people from all around Canada. And I knew who Colin James was. I hadn't thought about him at this point for a decade, but he was honored, and I was like, that's awesome. So me being at the bar, I looked over, and he was at the other end, like maybe like 6-7 feet away. And I talked to him. I said, oh, Colin James. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, congratulations. I'm like, you got in the Hall of Fame today. And he's like, yeah, very cool, very cool. And I was like, that's great. And then his manager came over, tapped him, said something, then they left. And I was like, cool. I just talked to Colin James the day he got inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame. That's awesome. So cool. So like I said, I wanted to shout him out. And as we do here, I'm going to go through my top 4 Colin James tracks. My number 4, Voodoo Thing. My number 2, Why'd You Lie? Very popular blues song on that. My number 2, 5 Long Years, pops it up. It's a little bit more peppy with that one. And his number 1, Colin James's biggest hit, Just Came Back to Say Goodbye. So with that, my number 5 is Saskatchewan's own Colin James.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely had a buddy in high school who listened to Colin James a lot. So by proxy, I listened to Colin James a lot because of that. And so it's very good. It's not something I would listen to. I'd never listened to it on my own, but it was good, party music for when we're hanging out.
Yeah, of course. It's honestly, it's fun. Kind of it's exactly what it is. And it's cool outside music as well, too. Fun fact, too. A reason in my wedding, too, he does a version of Van Morrison's Into the Mystic that really stuck with me. It's fantastic. It's awesome. And I remember I really got into it after when I had seen him in 2013. I downloaded or bought one of his best ofs, and he had that on there. And that's an honorable mention shout out because it's not technically his song, but it stuck with me to the point where I used Van Morrison's version at my wedding. But that was mainly just like you had Skinny Puppies. My foray into that was through Colin James doing that version of that song. So yeah, I hear you, man.
Cool.
Jim, what do you got?
Jim, what's your number 5?
So I went off the board with my number 5 because you guys know that I'm usually very much a rock guy, and the 4 to 1 on my list is going to focus more so on rock, a rock aspect of it, classic rock. But for my number 5, I wanted to celebrate a genre that we're probably not going to talk about very much on this list, and that is children's music. And Canada actually does have a real rich history with children's music and celebrating. Depending on the era that you were born, AB, you were born in 77, 78, right?
77, yeah.
77. Scott, you were born in 87, so you're a bit closer to me. I'm an 89 birthday. So depending on your era, you might remember television shows like The Friendly Giant, obviously, which aired in AB's era, ended in 84. Sharon, Lois, and Bram had The Elephant Show that aired from about 84 to 89. And also one of the big popular acts of the time is Raffi. Baby Beluga is very much played when I was in kindergarten, and we still had the big blue box record players with vinyl. That's when actual grade school still had vinyl playing.
Yeah.
And also Banana Phone was played for kids later on during my brother's era, which was like 2000s, and God, what an annoying song that was. But my number 5 is somebody that I didn't mention out of those guys. And he also had a television show that ran for about 13 years on CBC. And he actually replaced the Friendly Giant in the TV lineup for CBC's Daytime Kids lineup. And that man wrote a little album called The Cat Came Back, and he is
Yes, a very big deal.
That's a good call. You're saying those other names, I'm not going to know who this is, but Fred Penner's the king.
Yeah.
Fred Penner is absolutely the king. The man that came out of the log every day onto our television screens for near 15 years, and he actually had a bit of an established representation in America because the show was actually picked up on Nickelodeon for about 4 or 5 years. So he did have some reach into the American market, but he's truly Canadian to us because after all, he was a staple on CBC. It was him. It was Mr. Dress Up, pretty much from about 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock every day for about 13 years. And so since about the early 1980s, he's been writing children's music, and it continues to this day, because actual most recent Juno Award for Best Children's Album was 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Order of Canada member, born in Winnipeg. And one of the interesting stories about Fred Penner is look at the degrees that he has in both economics and psychology. Not quite something that you would say, hey, this guy's going to go into music. But music was his love, self-taught. His sister had cerebral palsy, had developmental disabilities when she was a kid. So it really inspired him to be, and as a self-taught musician, it inspired him to write music for her, be creative. And so after some untimely deaths early on in his life from a bunch of different family members, kind of focused him to go on to a different path than, say, the corporate world. And so along with his wife, he actually started in children's theater. CBC discovered him, and from 85 to 97, Fred Penner's Place was on CBC every day, Monday through Friday. And an interesting story, actually, with Fred Penner. In 1997, this was after Mr. Dressup had stopped filming in 1996. They would still air the show, obviously, because God knows he had a volume of so many shows. CBC axed some of the shows in the children's division, and so Fred Penner was taken off the air somewhat abruptly, even though he was like the only guy and he was still filming. And so obviously you feel a disconnect to the audience when that happens, and unfortunately kind of felt that way, felt kind of disconnected. He was, because one of his mediums was taken away. But 10 years down the line, he started getting calls from certain university groups who had kind of a nostalgia kick. So what ended up happening was that he started actually playing his children's concerts to university publics that remembered, hey, these great songs.
Yeah,
The Cat came back. I Had a Rooster. Sandwiches are beautiful. Sandwiches are mine. I like sandwiches. I eat them all the time. I eat them for my supper and I eat them for my lunch. And if I had 100 sandwiches, I eat them all at once. Stuff like that. So
wow,
he
bringing me back.
He had a renaissance in the late 2000s that kind of brought him back with his audience that he not necessarily abandoned him, that he thought had forgotten him, but it was really kind of a nice little touching moment there. So Fred Penner is my number 5, just because of the nostalgia for me and probably the nostalgia for a lot of Canadian youth who are my age.
Definitely. I didn't even, my mind didn't even go there, but yeah, that's a great pick.
Great pick.
I would have come on the tail end of that. He said he started in 85. I was already I was 8 years old when he would have started. So when he would have got into his like prime, I would have been, listening to Skinny Puppy.
Exactly.
So that's when I remember watching him on TV when I was a kid. And so and man, like you said, he was all over the TV for basically, almost 30 years. On the regular. So the fact that through syndication obviously too, but he's a staple. He's a Canadian icon, not just musically, but obviously as television as well. So yeah, it's a great call.
Mm-hmm. Scott,
Awesome.
Did you grow up with Mr. Fred Penner, or were you more?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit, but I mean, as far as my stuff was definitely Dress Up, big time. But no, I've heard of them, but I could not enough to be able to pull through my brain Rolodex.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna move on to our number 4. So my number 4 is when I started going through the list and started thinking about bands that I like. I was like, okay, I like this band, but I only like 1 or 2 of their albums, or I like this band a lot a long time ago, but I don't listen to them anymore. And then I got to this band, who are my number 4, and I was like, you know what? I've listened to these guys for over 20 years now, and they are still putting out great music. I've not loved a single album that they've put out. I've loved every single one. I've seen them multiple times, and I'm talking about Montreal's Stars. And so they are out of Montreal. They're all originally from Toronto, Canada. But then a bunch of them moved to New York and tried to make it there. They couldn't make it, and so they moved to Montreal, hooked up with a couple other guys, and formed Stars. Two of the guys had already recorded an album as Stars, but then they brought everybody on and recorded their first like the first one was called Night Songs. The second album is when they get as like basically as the full band, which is called Heart. That album is called Set Yourself on Fire, which is one of my favorites from them. So they're members, and I will bring them up on here. So you have Torkel Campbell, Amy Milan, Evan Cranley, Chris Seligan, Patrick McGee, Chris McCarran, and then basically been the same lineup from the start. Their music, even though it's like kind of 80s Renaissance with a lot of synth and a lot of guitar, like 80s guitars, it sounds really new too. And so you have the two different singers there. You have Amy Milan and Torkel Campbell, who basically sing back and forth, or take turns singing between the two of them, which is what I like a lot. Like that kind of like dynamic of the back and forth call and response kind of stuff. They started touring early on with Broken Social Scene, and Broken Social Scene is basically a like Canadian supergroup, which members will come and go, and basically will if whoever they're touring with, they'll bring on to play irons with. And so early on they toured together, and every night they would switch members. And so sometimes like Amy Milan, when I saw Broken Social Scene, Amy Milan was singing the female vocals, and so Feist has also sang for Broken Social Scene, and like a number of indie Canadian members will have played with Broken Social Scene times. So I've seen them twice. Amy Milan was singing for them the one time I saw Stars actually at here in Windsor at the place that you had your wedding reception.
Oh,
Scott.
Okay, yeah.
The church down by the river. They
cool.
played a show there, and Amy Milan was hanging out back as we left, and so we got to say hi to her as we were leaving. And she
Water's
was Water's Edge, and so she's really cool. She's real nice. These are my top 5 favorite albums. The one I showed up was the second, my number 2, Set Yourself on Fire. My number 1 being Dead Hearts. No, sorry, The Five Ghosts. The Five Ghosts. Sorry, I don't know why I said Dead Hearts is my favorite song off that album. These are my favorite tracks by them. This is my number 1 track. It's called Dead Hearts, which is off that number 1 album. Your Ex-Lover is Dead is off Set Yourself on Fire. Elevator Love Letter, The North, and He Dreams He's Awake. Again, I really they have a lot of really interesting songs that are not that are pop. It's poppy and it's very pop music, but it's got a little different. It's not just fluff. They really have really meaningful and emotional songs, which I can appreciate. I can appreciate the pop side of it, and having that kind of fun pop sound as well. So like I said, they're a band that I've continually liked a lot, every album that they've put out, and like they sustain this level of really great music with every single release. And so that's they have 9 albums total, and a whole ton of, they've released a ton of EPs, but mainly 9 studio albums in 20 years. So pretty productive.
Cool.
Awesome.
Heard of them. I've heard of them. I know they came here a few times. Maybe we gave out tickets, but yeah, I've definitely heard of Stars.
Yeah.
They're like popular.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay. So for my number 4, we're gonna go to somebody who was massive for me. Massive for me in my high school days. I'm still a big fan of his, and I'm really excited to showcase and talk about him. You know, he and another guy who will show up later were pretty much neck and neck for me around the same time, and you know, they did a lot of the same kind of music, and you know, just Hollywood mainstream kind of went with the other guy as well, but I don't ever want this guy to be forgotten. So for my number 4, I'm going to be going with, from Toronto, twice Juno nominated, no winners yet. I'm going to be going with Matt Dusk. Anyone familiar with Matt Dusk?
No, sir.
Let me hit you with some knowledge. This guy, very much a Sinatra-style jazz crooning sound. This is his song right now, 2 Shots of Happy, 1 Shot of Sad, off his debut album, 2 Shots. And for me, when that came out in 2004, by far one of my favorite kind of albums. It's very much a smoky whiskey lounge jazz croon, and for me, that was mainlining through my veins. So Matt Dusk here had come out with a lot of the same songs that, say, Michael Bublé, around the same time, and he will come up later. And you know, they did a lot of the same songs on their albums, and they were kind of neck and neck. And you know, Matt Dusk came out with this song was written, this was going to be a Sinatra song, and it was written by Bono and given to Matt Dusk. It's an incredible story. And as he'd gone, I've been a fan of his since day one. And his Christmas album, Back in Town, well, Back in Town gets a little bit bigger, more bombastic. He does some pop jazz in that. Then he really goes off the reservation with Good News. Good News to me is borderline unlistenable. He went into like some synth rock, pop, horror, but no, like
synth.
No, but it's like Fisher Price synth guitar. Like it's bad, unlistenable. And
but I love it.
No, it's not rock. It's jazz. It's like, I don't, maybe am I not using the right word for synth? Like he used like a synthesizer. Like it's not like rock. It's jazz croon through and through. I know I'm confused. Why would you? It's not good. To the point where he comes back and scales his sound back, and he goes back to My Funny Valentine and does a lot of Chet Baker stuff, and you're like, okay, thank God he's back to this kind of sound, and slowly he kept with it. So he definitely veered off with the Good News stuff, made it way too poppy, made to love ballady, and then he's back, and I think late 2019 he came out with Sinatra, which was all Sinatra covers. So Matt Dusk, always been a big fan of his, to the point where I actually had the chance to meet the gentleman. Went to go see him in 2010, and that was in London on Valentine's Day, and I had driven out there and stood in line, and I remember I was me and 40-year-old women, and the one he was talking about, the Good News, which was his 4th album, and I was like, oh yeah, in that video you were on a picnic, which he was, and he's like, yeah, how do you know that? I'm like, bro, I'm your biggest fan here, guaranteed. And then we started joking and riffing, and then to the point where he got chummy with his photo. So I just had my mom, she has that in a frame in her house, and I was like, Mom, can you take a picture of me and Matt Dusk? So she sent that to me. So if I can, my top 4 Matt Dusk tracks, they're all off his first 2 albums. And as you'll see with, 4-1, all the, pretty much the first song or album I listen to usually remains at the top of my list. So Lonely Road is a very, very slow, mellow, almost sad jazz croon song. That's off his debut album. Back in Town, which is off the 2nd album, the titular album, Back in Town, and All About Me. And as well, as I said, his best is the number 1 song of his will always be 2 Shots of Happy, 1 Shot of Sad, which that and the remix are fantastic. So my number 4 from Toronto, jazz croon singer, Matt Dusk.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. I've definitely never heard of the dude. So
yeah, actually, what's funny is V knew I liked him, and V did his banking in Etobicoke.
That's hilarious.
He texted me. He's like, "Do you used to like Matt Dusk?" I'm like, "Of course." This is like 6 years ago. He's like, "Oh, I'm doing his banking right now. I'm meeting with him," and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing."
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, Jim.
All right, so
Number
we're going
4.
to go into the bit of the mainstream here with number 4. I shouldn't say mainstream now, but mainstream back in the classic rock days.
There you go.
A guy who actually debuted in the 60s, rose to the top and then stepped away from the music scene because his Mormon religious beliefs didn't really fit in with the sex, drugs, and rock and roll era
I know. I think I know where
of
you're
that
going.
time. Took a couple years off, came back as the lead singer now of this band and lead guitarist, and hit the charts again at #1. And this person, and I will pull it up in a second. This person is a portly man like myself. The man's name is Randy Bachman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guitarist of the Guess Who, lead singer and guitarist of Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Yeah, I was like, okay, Scott. I'm like, you know who Bachman Turner Overdrive is.
Yeah, of course I do.
And you know who Guess Who is.
Yeah, I know. It's good.
It sounded like you're like, you don't know who this person is. I was like,
you've
heard of those bands before.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, 3 #1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100 with both Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive, which is quite unique because you don't have a lot of people that can go from one, go to the other, and still be successful. And an Order of Canada recipient in 2008. You might recognize the name Bachman as well because it's kind of a musical legacy in Canada, because his son Tal actually had a very popular, and it's still kind of popular on Top 40 radio right now, She's So High, reached #14. And re-recorded several times. Guest starred on The Simpsons in 2000. Matt Groening is actually a huge fan of BTO. So the reason why they appeared in the state fair scene was because of Matt Groening's love of the band. And so there was a fictionalized reunion. No new crap, taking care of business now. So I could imagine Matt Groening say something like that. And I mean, he churned out the hits. These Eyes, American Woman, No Time, Taking Care of Business, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. I mean, he kind of went from a softer style with Guess Who, because obviously Burton Cummings was doing the singing in that band. He was more of the guitarist. But then you kind of get that almost like, how would you say it? Working man style rock almost when he went to BTO. You kind of get that 70s, ode to the guy that punches out 9 to 5 in the factory with Taking Care of Business, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, and Hey You. A little bit harder, a little bit more to my style, but Randy Bachman obviously has had a long and very successful career as a Canadian musician. He's my #4.
And he still continues to have an influence on Canadian music. He has a rodeo program that airs on CBC2 on Sunday nights, which as I'm driving home from my folks on Sunday nights, I listen to him on the way home. He has a radio, and he's great. He does themes every Sunday. He has a lot of different themes, and so he'll play a bunch of records, a bunch of music from a certain theme, and it'll be a different one every weekend, and it's great. I love it. I love like the idea of themes within his playlists, and so he's very well spoken. Obviously, if he's gonna run a radio show, but he'll give the history of a record, right? Because a lot of these records that he's playing, it's people he's played with or knew a lot about at the time, and so he'll obviously super knowledgeable, and will give like the history of each record as it comes on, and he'll be like, oh, when I toured with this person back in '72, this happened and this happened, and so they recorded there, and you kind of get these like behind the scenes scoop on stuff, which obviously we love that kind of stuff, right? That's why we're doing these shows. And so I highly recommend his program. I think it runs 7 to 9, and then George Strombolombolombolus comes on after him,
if I'm not mistaken, called Vinyl Tap, I believe.
Yes, that is it. That's exactly what it's called.
Yeah. So, and I like that when musicians do it. Obviously, here in Windsor, because we have Detroit across the border, Alice Cooper has done one that's very popular as well, and very much in the same style as Randy Bachman. A lot of history behind it, a lot of stories behind it. These guys, they just don't play music; they're historians, and they are music.
They are music. They don't just play it; they are music. So
and they really are embracive of their history, and in many cases of the present as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely say Canadian royalty. And so as we're continuing to talk about Canadian royalty, my next band is the oldest band on my list, and they are definitely part of Canadian royalty. They are also from Toronto, Ontario, and they are Blue Rodeo.
Oh, sure.
All right.
They're formed in Toronto in 1984. It's so basically Blue Rodeo comes down to two guys, and you have Jim Cuddy and you have Greg Keeler, and both those guys went to university together and decided they wanted to form a band. And so the two of them started recording records together. They brought on Bob Wiseman, they brought on David Wilcox, and they brought on Cleve Anderson to form the first iteration of Blue Rodeo. And they played that country infused rock that they've been recording ever since, and they basically are still recording albums. They're still touring. Obviously, nobody's touring now, but it's because of the pandemic. But like up until the thing, they continue to put out music and continue to make great music. They were inducted into the Canadian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, obviously. And so one of the things, again, the same thing that I like about Stars is you have two basic songwriters, and you have Jim Cuddy and Greg Keeler. They both take turns singing the lead vocals, and they both take turns writing the music. And so you have Jim Cuddy's songs, which are more poppier, more I want to see more mainstream, but like more crowd pleasers, stuff like try and Lost Together, like that's more poppier side. Then you got Greg Keeler, who has the more darker, more like sinister songs, and so I like that mix where you get those two different sides. You have the dark and the light almost, and their songwritings, and it kind of goes back and forth on each album, or not each album, but each song is very, very different. You get a different side of it, and so they're one of the things that, even though they have the dark and the light, the different sides, their vocal harmonies are unbelievable. I just love them to death on a lot of these tracks. These are my top 5 albums. 5 Days in May is easily my favorite record of theirs. It is just hit after hit on there, even in the non singles are all great as well. And my number one song from them Hasn't Hit Me Yet. I remember driving up north with some of my buddies, and it was on, and we all were singing along to it, and really getting into it, and you were doing the harmonies and the whole bit, and it just has that really great memory of driving up north with my buddies to go, to a cottage, and like feeling the Canadian of the outdoors, singing Hasn't Hit Me Yet, the four of us, and it was a great moment, and I always think about that. And another fun fact, my number 4 song, Bad Timing, I closed off my 40th birthday party singing karaoke with my buddy Riley, the two of us singing that song, and Francois was the host. He was the host of the party, so he was running the karaoke. So I always remember singing Bad Timing with my buddy Riley. I just they have a ton of albums. They have, I think, 15 studio albums plus 4 live albums, and they have just countless Junos. And like I said, they tour through this whole, basically the entire time that they've been a band, they tour nonstop. They're always coming through, always playing the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto, and just a staple of Canadian music. So I had to put those on there because another band that I've never not liked an album that they put out, and they put out a lot. So that tells you about the amount of great music they put on all over basically almost, what are we looking at, 37 years as a band. It's pretty impressive to be still making great music even after all these years.
There's certainly going to be a lot of those bands that feel almost like, you get to, when we're talking about some of these bands that have kind of gone mainstream into North America almost because they've reached a lot of popularity in the United States. Blue Rodeo kind of feels like one of those ones that's truly Canadian because they almost haven't had that success.
Yeah.
Like almost like a Sloan or a Sam Roberts who have never reached they have tried, but they haven't. And Tragically Hip obviously is another one that feel almost truly Canadian. It's like
I think that's part of the problem is they have that certain sound that sounds, and I mean, and a lot of those bands like Blue Rodeo and Tragically Hip and even Sloan make references to Canada in their songs. So, like, I don't know if that factors into it too, but it definitely, like you said, has that they're truly Canadian bands. So
cool. Okay, you were talking about royalty. Do you guys want to keep the royalty talk going? Because if you guys want, we can keep the royalty talk going and be talking about the king of music, whether you like it or not. He is the quintessential king of music. Last year, reached 50 billion streams on Spotify. No artist comes close. Double number 2. 228 total entries on the Billboard Hot 100, most of any artist. 42 top 10s, the most of any artist. Ladies and gentlemen, the king of music, Drake. Young Money. Had to get him on here. For me, for people my age, his music is must listen to when he's coming out with an album. We're waiting for Certified Lover Boy. It's supposed to come out in January. Where is it? Where is it, Aubrey? Still waiting. But with that, Drake, between all his EPs and mixtapes and debuts and features and stuff, I kept with his first mixtape as well as all his studio albums as well too, mixing in a lot of his bigger ones there. Mainly I had to put Drake on here because whether you do or don't, he's the king of music right now. He is the most important person in popular music, regardless, of rap, pop. He's the one who gets studio play. And when he releases an album, you know that is going to be on the radio and serious for continuous. And I have gone through ebbs and flows where I've taken Drake off as a favorite artist on my Sirius because it's constant. He is played on all the rap albums, throwback albums, the current, everything, pop hits too, Soul Cycle, everything. Drake. And I was like, I got to get rid of this. I'll listen to Drake when I want to, but he is by far the number one most played. Winner of 4 Juno Awards, but that's not even to count all the other awards and everything he got. For me, though, too, it's just, he's got incredible rhymes, incredible stories, a great sound. And as I said, too, he's one who mixes his real life, with the somber tones of his introverted stuff and his introspective songs. And, it was a big deal for, the rap community back on Scorpion, which is most recent album to date in 2018, when Pusha T on one of his diss tracks said that Drake had a kid with a porn star. And everyone's like, what? And then he comes out and acknowledges it. And I mean, everyone online was just like, it was a huge deal on Twitter, man. When he had a kid named Adonis with a porn star that no one knew about, that was a big story in music.
He immediately becomes Despin's guy from that.
He's always been my guy. So with that, like I said, just how Drake's been, navigated being a kid actor. He was on Degrassi. Everyone knows that. To how he got in with Wayne and Nicki, and then just kind of, he does so much, man.
From what I understand, he started at the bottom, and now he's here. Oh,
but just, he's on his worst behavior. But like anything else, like we're going to talk about, he comes up with so much. So when I talk about the top 4 Drake tracks right now, it's going to be a lot of stuff I remember hearing at the very beginning, because most of my favorite artists, when I first heard, that's what usually sticks with me. So my number 4 favorite Drake song, Take Care. He does that. Rihanna is featured on that one. My number 3, very popular, Hold On, We're Going Home. My number 2 Drake is Headlines, which is a little bit of arrogant Drake, which I really like. And the number 1 song is what you're hearing right now. This is Drake making it right now. I know way too many people in here that I didn't know last year. What am I doing? That's right. I'm doing me. So for that, number 3, Aubrey Graham, a.k.a. Drake.
I knew. Well, we obviously knew that was going to be on there. That was a no-brainer. So
I didn't know where he was going to fit. I didn't know where he's going to fit. He's the only thing about Drake. It's a little bit of oversaturation because a lot of his stuff doesn't feel special anymore because he's, you know, mixtapes and this and that and features, and he's on stuff with Meek and Hemmer against each other, and he's on he did DJ Khaled's album came out, he's on 2 tracks on that, he's on one with Bieber as well too, and you're just like, you know, he's always consistent, he's always at the top. But, you know, if you wanted something to feel a little bit more special, like some of my other artists as well too, you don't really get it with Drake just because he's always in the spotlight, but it's better than being forgotten. So
for sure.
Kim, what do you got?
I loved when Inside the NBA did their parody when Views of the Six came out, and
Honesty and Tower.
Yes, and so they captioned a whole bunch of the other guys in different views, and so Ernie was on the bench with his Georgia Bulldogs.
That was a huge meme, man.
Yeah,
that's one thing that's sick about Drake. The CN Tower stuff, the Tootsie slide, the I just flipped a switch, and then they had the dance out of the car. Like, Drake is a meme maker, whether you like it or not, man. We live in a TikTok, Instagram generation, and Drake has a monopoly on people doing shit like that. Like, everything that comes out, every mainstream music like that is set to Drake. It's crazy how he does that.
Yeah. And then Charles was doing obviously Views from the Hot sign, so he's on a Krispy Kreme sign. And then the one that you'll love, Scott, is Shaq was on perched atop Kobe and views from Kobe's shoulders.
That's good.
Meaning that he carried him to his
very good.
Yeah, which caused Shaq to actually walk off the set and
I gotta check
when he
that
saw
out.
that. It's on YouTube. You'll catch it. But we're talking about Canadian royalty. My number 3 would actually qualify as Canadian music royalty as well, because he has probably, in the genre of rock, has mastered stadium rock, arena rock, going to soft rock, and even hitting the ballads, because he has 4 number 1 hits on the Billboard chart. This gentleman has sold over 100 million records worldwide. He is Bryan Adams.
There you go.
20-time Juno Award winner. This little ditty right here, Reckless, was released in 1984. It obviously was not making the top of the charts in 1984 because Thriller and Purple Rain had a domination of it. But with the hits that were on it, Run to You, Heaven, Somebody, Summer of '69, that album kept on singling with so many bangers, and it hit number 1. Actually broke up songs from the Big Chair's reign of 5 weeks at the top of the Billboard charts in 1985. Tears for Fears album.
You know what's sad about that?
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, Canada's got to represent, brother.
That's it.
But and the other thing about Bryan Adams too, obviously his influence obviously comes from world traveling, father diplomat of the Canadian government, United Nations. Also, did not know this, but he is actually quite the accomplished photographer, and actually his photography of several musicians and several celebrities have featured in a bunch of famous magazines. As you see, Vanity Fair, Esquire, and Harper's Bazaar there. Also, the British GQ. A lot of the different versions of what we could consider famous magazines over here, Esquire, in different countries. A lot of this work has been featured there. And then, obviously, the stuff that I like from Bryan Adams is obviously his harder rocking stuff. Somebody, Cuts Like a Knife, Summer '69, Run to You. Obviously, he does cater to a softer side, the female audience, with his ballady stuff. So Heaven, Everything I Do It For You, obviously from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves soundtrack, which massive hit. Have You Really Ever Loved a Woman? And obviously All for One for All with Sting and Rod Stewart was his 4th number 1 hit. We talked about Sting on one of our earlier episodes and how his stuff kind of went more towards the female side of the audience. But Bryan Adams has mastered it all and done it pretty well, and continues to be a very popular act and a true Canadian royalty when it comes to music for his lasting effect. and for his influence. So number 3, Bryan Adams, one of the best.
Yeah, I mean, out of the three of us, I was. You guys were born basically during his prime, but I was listening to the radio in his prime, and you could not escape Bryan Adams on the radio throughout the 80s, especially living in Canada. It was constant. It was his and like you said, you rhymed off all his hits there. It wasn't just Summer of '69. People remember him now for Summer of '69, but at the time, all through the 80s, and even now, there's a ton of hits that all were on the radio constantly, and music videos. And you're right. It like you look at, when you start thinking of Canadian artists, he's one of the first that comes to mind, because he's just been everywhere as far as Canadian artists can be. Like he's reached the pinnacle. Like Summer '69 is not just a top Canadian song; it is a top song. Period.
When CBC did a profile on him, he was actually, if I'm not mistaken, it might have changed obviously because there's so many people that have merged. Michael Bublé, Drake with sales, but he was in the top 5 at the time, and this might have been back in like 2011, 2012. Top 5 of the best-selling Canadian artists of all time. So
just crazy,
without a doubt. And then you mentioned that obviously he had a very popular Unplugged MTV. Back to You, I think, was one of his big hits that came from that. The Best of Me is one of his greatest hits albums, is one of my favorites as well. But yeah, Bryan Adams is really cranked out hits for about 25 years. Collaborated with a lot of musicians. I think Mel C from Spice Girls.
Tina Turner, which is a great track. I love that track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, you can't if you're making a list, and you can't argue putting Bryan Adams on a top Canadian album, top Canadian artist. All right, we're gonna go into our number 2s. This is the band that I thought you guys would peg me for. And like I said, when I say it, you're gonna be like, yeah, of course. From Montreal, Quebec, formed in 2000. I'm talking about Arcade Fire.
Okay, cool. I've heard of that, but I want to get a little lesson right now. They're a big deal.
Okay, they are a big deal. They were, indie darlings for a long period of time. They basically started off as a husband and wife. It's Win Butler and Regine Chassang. I don't remember how to say her last name. Basically started it. They brought along Win's brother, William Butler, along with Richard Reed Perry, Tim Kingsbury, and Jeremy Gara, make up the band. And they're a big band. You're talking like a ton of members that play a variety of different instruments. And like I said, early on in the 2000s, they were indie darlings, and they toured. They had a really huge following in Montreal because of their crazy live shows. And they find new and unique ways to perform, and they had really crowd-pleasing songs that really involved the audience, and it got them a huge following throughout the Montreal music scene. Funeral came out, and Funeral exploded on the indie scene. It was a huge record for them. It really got them a lot of attention, including a guy I may have heard of. I don't know if you've heard of him, David Bowie. You guys familiar with that guy? He's
done a few things.
He championed the band, and so he was one of the. He was the actor. He was one of their biggest champions, and he was preaching the gospel of Arcade Fire, and so he really took them to the next level by promoting them. This is one of the biggest songs, "Wake Up." I'm sure you've heard it before. This song, when they played it live, they would go take out all the stops, and some of their shows got so insane that like they basically wrecked halls because people went so crazy during the show. And it's not like heavy metal music or whatever where people are like smashing into each other. But people go crazy during the shows. Fast forward to 2011, and they release The Suburbs, which is my number 1 album out there. It's their best album. and this song is off of it. This album blew up, and it was the 2011 Grammy Album of the Year winner. They won Album of the Year, and basically people lost their minds. People were like, "Who the hell are these guys? Like, how do they win? Like, who are things?" And so there's this big like media hoopla of like all the basically mainstream listeners that were angry, like physically angry, that these guys came and had the audacity to win Album of the Year, even though it's an amazing album. But
Cool.
basically after that, here's my top songs from them. Reflector, actually number 5, David Bowie does backup vocals on, which as soon as I heard that it was the first single off that album, and when that song basically played on the radio, I was like, wait a second, is that David Bowie? It sounds like Bowie. And so I went on, jumped online, and like, sure enough, Bowie's on there recording. And so they were also nominated for an Oscar for the soundtrack for Her. They did the soundtrack for Her in 2013. And so they were nominated for that as well. And so they have been getting it's like, seems like it's very cool now to hate on them. And every album after The Suburbs came out, people were just like crapping on everything that they did after that. And I think it is because they won that Grammy for Album of the Year that it really put them in the spotlight and just like started making them people hate them. And so that's my theory anyways, because like yes, their albums after The Suburbs aren't as great as The Suburbs, but that's because that's their best album, and so like I still love all the albums after The Suburbs. I still enjoy it. I've seen them 3 times now. I actually I saw them at the Palace, and I saw them here at WFCU Center, and Broken Social Scene that I was mentioning earlier opened up for them, and it was an incredible show, and people were going crazy during that show. And same deal at the Palace. People were just going nuts when they played live. I will say they're one of the bands that I'd heard the legend of their live shows, and it lived up to the hype. Their live shows are crazy. They're very entertaining. They go all out when they play live, and it's much better than their recorded music, which is saying something, because I really like their recorded music as well. So yeah, that's my number 2 is Arcade Fire from Montreal.
Nice.
That's great. They're a big deal. I mean, you hear them all the time. You see them. They're all over Apple Music and stuff. And yeah, they're a big deal. I feel bad. I don't think I knew that they were even Canadian, but that's great.
They don't have that's the part that goes with it, that they don't have that Canadian sound, really.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that they were big. I feel like
Yeah. I mean, they got a lot of play when Much Music was still playing music videos before they became an abomination of what they become. Definitely, they were very promoted on Much Music, and I think I knew they were a Canadian band, but obviously it makes more sense knowing that the Canadian band and why they got so promoted. I don't think their hate probably is as much as someone like, say, the name that shouldn't be spoken, Nickelback. But
well, let's be fair. Some bands deserve the hate, some bands don't. So
I tell you, I'm going to say a little Nickelback. I like Nickelback. They're not awful. I want to defend them.
Are they your number 2?
They're not. They're off the list with Justin Bieber. But I don't hate on either of them. But the one thing that drives me nuts, and I've said this before, so I used to go to Lions season. I had Lions season tickets, and one year, let's say like 2008, the halftime show was Jesse McCartney. It was the pop boy band singer Jesse McCartney. The next year it was Nickelback, and people went ballistic. People were writing petitions. They're like, "You need a real band." I'm like, bro, no one cared a year ago that it was a pop boy band, and now it's Nickelback. It was cool. It was easy to hate on them for it. Yeah. And that kind of drove me nuts, because I'm like, man, they're at least kind of a cool rocking band. And
makes more sense for a football
it makes more sense than Jesse McCartney.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah. What year did you say Jesse McCartney performed?
Like 07, 08.
08, so no one was watching that game because the lines
That was
were
what I mean. It was like the 0-16 year. It was definitely coincided with that, and that's exactly what I mean. It might have been the year after, exactly, but yeah, I know. But I have no hate for Nickelback, and so yeah.
It actually makes me like Green Bay Packer fans more, knowing that they probably were the ones that petitioned hating Nickelback so
Maybe
much.
it's kind of funny.
Awesome.
Okay,
All right,
so
Scott, number
bring it
2.
back to my number 2. We're getting into the big names, guys. And like I said, when Matt Dusk was in competition back with another certain jazz croon singer, they both came out, a lot of the same songs, same albums, still at the same time. And Hollywood took to this guy a little more. And I am, of course, referring to the megastar Michael Bublé. So I heard Michael Bublé the first time. It was his sophomore album, It's Time. And this is the first track off that album. It's his rendition of Feeling Good, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I tried to keep off covers, but I can't. That's one of my all-time favorite. I remember the exact moment vividly when I put the album in. I had headphones on. I was laying on my bed, and I listened to it 3 times in a row. And I was like, I need to hear the rest of this album. And from then, Michael Bublé has just been a constant. And looking through some of his albums now, like I said, he started with Michael Bublé was his debut album into the second It's Time and Call Me Irresponsible in 07. And this was around, the peak of low-key Michael Bublé, where he was just breaking out, where he was a star, but he wasn't too big a star. And, he was a little pudgier around this time. And it was around Call Me Irresponsible. He was in a relationship with Emily Blunt. And you're like, oh, that's really cool. She's dating a Canadian jazz singer. And he was really big. And he was just about to get a really more mainstream. And it was with Crazy Love, to me, where he hits his apex, where he's done with the relationship. Crazy Love had a little bit more pure singing. And he kind of had a little bit of angst to him, too, because he was going through the breakup. The biggest mistake Michael Bublé made was that To Be Loved album that came out in about 2014. I'll get the exact. Crazy Love came out 2013. And Michael Bublé had gotten married right before. And To Be Loved, he took the angsty Sinatra, Dean Martin kind of sound, and all he did was love pop ballads. And in To Be Loved, he does like You Got a Friend in Me, and he does a song with Something Stupid with Reese Witherspoon. And I'm just like, and he's skinny now, and he's super mainstream, and he's super popular. And I'm just like, man, bro, where is the old cool Michael Bublé? That was like the lounge singer Michael Bublé, who was singing like Feeling Good or Me and Mrs. Jones or, Home, everything. Like those were the Michael Bublé's I wanted. And then with Crazy Love, he got into the pop. He did Haven't Met You Yet. And that was a huge, huge, huge hit. But then he got into, between that and Nobody But Me, he got into like the really poppy sound. And I was kind of out on him. But then ultimately back in 2018, he came out with his most recent album, Love. And much like Matt Dusk, he went back to the basics and he started singing a little bit of slower love ballads. But, Only Have Eyes for You, My Funny Valentine, which is an all-time song, Unforgettable, and I Get a Kick Out of You, things like that, classic style jazz croon. So for that, I was like, okay, Bublé's back. His old stuff for me will forever be top iconic. I loved his Christmas hosting. I love him hosting the Junos, 11-time winner, by the way, as well, too. And one of the lasting impacts that Michael Bublé will have on me is one of my all-time favorite Olympic moments. If you guys remember the 2010 closing ceremonies when he came out dressed as a Mountie and the women pulled off the Mountie suit and he was in the tuxedo, might never have told you this, but the inspiration for my wedding tuxedo. As soon as I saw that, I said, I am getting a white tuxedo jacket with the black lapels. So the answer to the trivia question is who inspired my look at my wedding? It was 100% the closing ceremonies of the 2010 Olympics with Michael Bublé. And I still YouTube that. That's an electric performance in Vancouver, his hometown. So we'll get through my top 4 favorite Michael Bublé tracks. And guys, like everything else, it's going to be a lot of his original stuff off his first half of his career. Haven't Met You Yet off of Call Me Irresponsible, or off of Crazy Love, rather. Home, is the one off Call Me Irresponsible. Everything as well. Those were the 2 big hits that really propelled him to stardom. And like I said, I wanted to keep off covers, but I can't do any of that when we got Feeling Good on the table. For me, that's Michael Bublé's masterpiece, is his cover of that. And for my money, of all the other ones, Muse and other people who have done it in the recent years, nobody even holds a candle to how good Michael Bublé did it.
Cool. And doesn't he sell like soda or something now?
Yeah, he makes
That's
drinking
what
water.
I mean, and that's fine. And like I get it, and that goes exactly into it.
Every time I see him on TV,
It's bubbly
it just
and
makes
it's
me laugh.
Bublé, and
Bubbly,
it's the
bubbly,
commercial, and that's
bubbly.
what everyone calls it. I get it. And it's just like there's two Michael Bublés.
Yeah.
Chubbier, like lounge singer angst Bublé. I've had this discussion with people. You know, the Emily Blunt breakup, and he got really angsty, and that's the Bublé I like. The skinny, you married to the European model. He's great. He's great. But he's definitely morphed into a different version, a more mainstream version. And it's what you said, you know, the Canadian struggling. No artist or, you know, actor or anybody, you know, was hungrier than when they first start out. You see it mostly in music, and we can go through the list of bands and rappers and stuff that I like. I'm very much a first time I heard them. If I like you at the very beginning, I will ride or die with you the rest of your career. But nothing ever really beats my first for any band or artist. So I'll never get that Bublé back. And you know, now that he's got a kid, and his kid had cancer, and his kid beat cancer, so he does a lot of like music as far as those emotions and happy music, happy stuff. And you know, maybe I'm selfish. I want sad and mopey Bublé, but we'll never get. You know, we'll always still have Me and Mrs. Jones and things like that. So.
I will say that LB, who may or may not watch this, is a big fan. So I've heard quite a bit of Bublé over the years, just because my mom's a big fan. And so I don't dislike it. I've never it's never been a thing where I've been like, oh, thing. I like crooner, jazz crooners as much as the next guy, and he's clearly one of the best modern.
He's the one
guys.
who got the most popular. I can sit here and rifle off about a dozen. He's the one that by far got the most famous,
and for good reason. Like he's a great showman, and he's got
a
great
modern day
voice.
Bob Hope. He's an incredible host, and does a lot for the Vancouver Canucks, and he's always at games. So he just transcends the fan base. So very cool.
I'm a fan just for that. That if you're going to be a crooner, you got to be a showman too. You got to put on a show.
I've seen him in concert 3 times. One time by myself. His most recent concert in 2019, March 2019 at the LCA. I went by myself.
Oh wow!
And saw that concert and made friends with my aisle.
Awesome. All right, Jim. What you got number 2?
I'll just say before this, Michael Bublé actually inspired me. He inspired me to bring my own music to work because I don't hate Michael Bublé. It's just being in the work setting that I am. There's obviously
the haven't met you yet video is at your work. It's a grocery store video. He's buying groceries and he meets the woman.
And it's played on an 8-hour loop every time. It's a Loblaws favorite apparently. So
big time.
Obviously, and I don't hate Michael Bublé. Obviously, I recognize his talent. I recognize that he is, a very popular voice of the generation. Obviously, like Tom Jones was before that, Sinatra, Dean Martin, obviously. But he kind of inspired me with the overplaying of his music to bring my own in at work, which actually features my number 2 band. And when we talked a couple episodes ago, I talked about a 3-piece band that was very very proficient in all 3 of their musicianships. I talked about the Police. I talked about how Sting, Andy Summers, and Stuart Copeland were so proficient and melded so together perfectly with their musicianship on this. AB knows where I'm going with this.
I don't know. I know where you're going, and I don't like it. I don't know if I should put it up.
But these guys are... You might not like the lyrics of them, but...
it's not the lyrics.
You might not like the lyrics. You might not like the waily vocals of the lead singer. And you might not like the early libertarian Ayn Rand style lyrics that the drummer put out. But needless to say, they are Canadian icons. Yeah. They are equally 3 proficient, true musicians.
Absolutely.
They're a band that I actually saw in the drummer's hometown at Cops Coliseum back in 2011, which was one of my favorite concerts ever. Yeah. And where I actually got the jersey that I probably have shown in one of the earlier episodes.
Yeah.
They are Rush. Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, Neil Peart. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees in 2013, probably one of the longer snubbed Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees because of the genre.
a lot of people were really pissed too. Like for the longest time, they were like, one of the things that people were like,
that's all I heard
very
about
angry.
not being a Russian, but I remember
Yeah.
like,
and it's not, and
I had
not
friends
just Canadians, like not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like that's the thing, like celebrities. They had celebrities that were like, this is bullcrap. Like,
Yeah. Paul Rudd probably at the top of it.
Jason
Slap-
Segel.
That's
Yeah.
cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
Jason
cool.
Segel is a big fan.
Slap of that BS, man.
Yeah.
9-time Juno Award winners. 11 of their albums and more of so of their later work, Permanent Waves onward. Top 10 in the Billboard 200 during their career. 40 million albums sold worldwide. Classic lineup obviously was installed in 1974. They had a drummer named John Rutsey who appeared on the first album, which was their self-titled album, featured their big hit Working Man.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of more of a true rock album, I guess would be it. But he left the band. He was having some issues with the travel lifestyle due to diabetes and with his diabetes as well. So they moved on. Neil Peart came in. He took over the songwriting duties. Had some weird leanings towards Ayn Rand stuff early on, and it was like weird. When I was actually watching their classic albums on their VH1 classic albums, they talked about that.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's crazy, because most people that look, and hey, I lean to the social democratic side. I think people that listen to that Ayn Rand bullshit are just crazy, loopy, crazy people. But hey, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's wrong or whatever, but I don't get it. They toured for a long time. Only had a little hiatus because Neil Peart had some tragedy in his life. I believe his daughter passed away rather tragically in the late 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But they reunited. They had a really successful period from 2000 onwards. Obviously, Trailer Park Boys helped that, with Alex Lifeson appearing on one of their episodes, and some of the stuff that was filmed at the Halifax Metro Center. That's with right. Bubbles playing Closer to the Heart. Right. Working Man,
who's also a musician too, right? He's
absolutely
Dropbox.
Yes, and there's actually a version of Closer to the Heart where Bubbles is playing the acoustic guitar alongside Alex.
And would actually be playing, not just miming it.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Mike Smith is truly a very talented acoustic guitarist. Working Man, Fly By Night, 2112, Closer to the Heart, Spirit of the Radio, Tom Sawyer. They went more into the synth electric stuff in the mid 80s with Signals onward. Songs like Marathon obviously had that electric influence with it. New World Man, but definitely they are Canadian royalty when it comes to being a proficient three-piece band with all their musicianship. Geddy Lee being able to play the bass and being able to play the keyboards at the same time. Neil Peart with his amazing drum solos, the rotating drum stage, which was one of the highlights of the concert. Not just incorporating regular drums, but also like the glockenspiel, other types of percussion that you would normally not see. You would see other musicians play them in the concert, like how would you say, touring musicians, I guess would be the word, right? But he incorporated it all into his huge ass drum set, which probably
it's insane.
Yeah, there's probably, I think there was like 130 pieces in that drum set, which is just absolutely insane.
It's crazy.
And Alex Lifeson's very underrated. He made the top 100 of Rolling Stone's top 100 guitarists of all time in 2012. Very underrated guitar playing. You kind of forget him between Geddy's.
I was gonna say he's not flashy like other guitarists.
Yeah.
He lets the other guys shine, but like you can't knock when you listen to the guitar. He's holding his own the entire time. So
absolutely, which is why they recognized him. And you get lost between the bombast of Neil's drumming and Geddy's witchy style vocals, which kind of cracked a little later on in his career, but no denying Rush's music royalty when it comes to Canadian bands. They're my number two, and for very good reason.
For sure. it's funny. It's kind of become a joke during trivia and stuff like that about Rush, me not liking Rush. And I continue to say time and time again, even though I say that I don't like Rush, I will never ever say that Rush suck by a long shot. I will say that all three are master music. I've said for years and years, all three are master musicians. All three are incredible at their instruments. If they played instrumental tracks the entire time, I would probably be a huge Rush fan. But it's just that the Geddy, as soon as Geddy's vocals, it's funny, when I was a kid, the song would come on the radio and I'd catch it in the middle of the song. And so you get one of their like jam breakdowns in the middle of their song. And I'm like, man, this is great. What is this? Do. And then it'll come bring up to the bridge to Geddy. And I'm like, oh.
See, I don't listen to a lot of this stuff. Like, I listen to a lot of the sound. They have a lot of like really good stadium rock stuff.
Sure.
That's what I gravitate to. But I mean, I understand how polarizing they were, but I guess I just don't listen to it like that. I don't know if I have that ability with like rock music. I just listen to like the sound and be like, this is a space adventure. This is what that feels like.
Yeah.
And like the start of Tom Sawyer, just like, what is happening? And so yeah, I had buddies that were big time Rush fans, big Rush fans. I don't really catch them around anymore, but guys in college and when I was in my 20s, I had some big Rush buddies that would always try and put it over on me.
And for the record, I own probably about 5 or 6 Rush albums. So as much as I don't like as much as I don't like them, I actually like them enough to own their records. So
and let the record show. And you would probably lean towards being a YYZ guy, right? Because it is an instrumental track.
Well, definitely their more prog stuff is what I like. Yeah. Just because it's a lot more instruments and a lot more like longer tracks. So I'm personally a big fan off this beautiful album, which reached number 3 on the Billboard. That's a good one.
200. The Camera Eye, which is obviously one of their album tracks. It's an 11-minute song, but just it picks up, it goes down. It's one of their best. If you are to listen, and we will probably make a Spotify soundtrack of some of this stuff for you guys later on that are watching this. If you do, definitely Camera Eye is going to be on there just for you to kind of sample some of Rush's longer songs, but one of their musically proficient songs.
Awesome. All right. We are going to move into our honorable mentions, I think, right?
I think so.
Okay, I actually don't remember who I put as honorable mentions, so I'm going to go along with you. Hopefully I recognize that.
It'll be a surprise.
Okay, this is from Toronto, Canada, Crystal Castles. We're an electronic group. Sadly, like I love their music. They have 3 albums with this singer, Alice Glass, she's incredible. When I saw them in Detroit, she had a broken foot and her foot was in a big, huge like a walking cast. And she performed the entire time and ran across the stage in a walking cast. She was nuts. Anyway, they haven't really aged well because he has part of the Me Too stuff. So this is Caribou. He goes by Caribou. It's one guy, Dan. And he is from I believe he's from London, Ontario. Is he from London? Anyway, he's electronic stuff. I've seen him a number of times. I saw him open for Radiohead, and I saw him in London. And finally, I could not leave him on here. This is Neil Young, who is absolute Canadian royalty. He had to make the list in some form. I have seen him. I saw him at the WFCU Center. He's an icon, a Canadian icon. So
yeah, we'll talk about him a little bit more.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure you made it on there. I was kind of things, but
I was not going to disappoint you there, brother.
Okay, good. All right, Scott.
I'll bring it back. I'm gonna forego my honorable mentions today. I want to give a shout out to my parents. My dad was a radio guy in Canada in the 80s. If there's one thing my parents love, it's music, and it's specifically Canadian music. They went to a ton of Junos, and my dad has a lot of pictures with a lot of like Canadian rock stars, and he wanted me to show them, but there wasn't enough time. So I'm going to be discussing today Andrew Despins and Joanne Despins' honorable mentions. So if you can bear with me. So my father's honorable mentions, his top 5 that he gave me consist of Triumph.
Okay.
Lay it on the
Jeff
line.
Healey. His number 3 is Tom Cochrane.
Life is a Highway, baby. Love it.
My dad's number 2 is Loverboy, and he wanted me to point out that his number 1 is The Guess Who and the solo career of Burton Cummings.
There you go.
Was his number 1. So he follows him solo as well too. And we're gonna bring it to my mom, Joanne. Hi, Mom. Her number 5 is Blue Rodeo.
Hey,
Jim Cuddy. Yeah,
Joe.
I knew you'd like that.
Joe.
Yeah.
That's my
Her
girl.
number 4, Anne Murray.
There we go.
Number 3, Glass Tiger.
Okay.
Okay.
I've seen
Her
them.
number 2, Honeymoon Suite. And my mom's number 1 that I could have guessed without her prompting is Johnny Reed.
Cool.
So that's to them.
Jim, you got slides?
I don't have slides for my honorable mentions, obviously, but I will say a couple names. Obviously, if you don't see Shania Twain on my list, I've done her on the Women in Music, so she made my number 3 in Women for the Music. She definitely is the alpha for me because obviously just a beautiful woman and an awesome hit-making singer. But my honorable mentions are going to be a couple of the bands that featured in some of my favorite video games when I was a kid, the NHL series.
Cool.
So actually, I've seen this one band in concert, Gob, back in 2012 when they
Okay, give up the grudge.
Mike Mueller loves you right now. He's all he was a humongous Gob fan in high school. He loved Gob.
Give Up the Grudge, I Hear You Calling, Oh Ellen were featured on all of the NHL games from 2002 to 2004. Trouble Charger, actually,
I've seen Trouble Charger.
Great
Very cool
song.
My Reach for the Top teammate Corey Yednaraz, back in the day when I was playing Reach for the Top, his uncle was actually the guitarist Bill Priddle of the band Trouble Charger. So cool. Nice little tie-in story there.
I saw them at the university bar.
Nice.
Way back in the day.
And obviously there's some bands that would play these clubs, like obviously the Room, Boom Boom Room. There were a couple clubs that in the city of Windsor that would actually host some of these guys. Sloan, I think, played in what was that? The Loop.
I was there.
Absolutely. And Sloan's another one of my favorite ones, obviously. The Rest of My Life, one of my favorite, Believe in Me, Parallel Play, and what was their 2003 album? Action Packed. A couple of my favorite albums. And,
interesting. Very interesting.
And one more mention, obviously, Bare Naked Ladies. They kind of had a very small apex mountain from about 97 to 2002, but they hit it really big in the States, based off a couple huge bangers, Brian Wilson, The Old Apartment, Pinch Me, and obviously, which one was featured on the Mazda commercials? 1 week. It was like Mazda or Honda commercial.
Yeah, I think
for years. One week was obviously a staple of commercials for years. So some honorable mentions there.
All right, we'll move into our number ones. And Jim, what was that second last band that you mentioned? Some band, I think they're from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Oh, brother, I love you for doing this.
Oh, that would be Sloan. My number one Canadian band is the band Sloan. These guys are a band that I listened to super early in high school, probably like 92. They were formed in 91. Their first album, they released an EP first, and then they released their first album in 92. They are basically had the same four guys since they started. They are out of Toronto now, but originally part of the Halifax sound. There was a real Halifax scene where with them and Eric's Trip and Thrush Hermit, and there's a whole ton of them. I listened to them all during high school, but Sloan was the one that stood out for me. And so they are made up of the same four guys they started with, and that's Chris Murphy, Patrick, Jay Ferguson, Andrew Scott, and Patrick Pentland. And one of the things that I actually before I get into the band, they were the very first concert that I ever went to, and it was at the St. Denis Center, and it was called Lancapalooza, and it was the Watchmen, Juliana Hatfield, the Gandharvas, Maestro Fresh West, the Watchmen, and Sloan. And After I saw Sloan, Sloan blew everyone else out of the water. I loved all those other bands too, but Sloan blew everyone else out of the water. They sounded incredible live. And one of the coolest things about this band is all four of them write the songs. So they all take turns writing the songs. And when you watch them live, they will literally rotate instruments per song. So they all four of them can play all four instruments. All four of them rotate and play the instruments during each other songs that they wrote and sing lead vocals to, and they just rotate while you watch them live. And they each take turns doing vocals, and they have the really obviously Beach Boys influenced harmonies that they throw in there. They've just put album of after album of incredible songs, incredible albums. They just released their latest album in 2018, and it's called 12 because that's how many albums that they've released, is 12 albums. And they just continue to put out great music year after year after year. And every time I listen to their thing, I'm like, oh, Sloan put out a new album. Maybe I'll check it out. And I put it on. I'm like, holy crap! I love this. I still love this. I still love these guys even after all these years. And here's my top 5 albums. I held up their Navy Blues. Twice as Removed is their second full length album, which was my number 1. Which it's just littered with hits. And one of the cool things that I read about while I was doing some research about it is the first track on there. It's called Pen Pals. And it is a song that when you listen to it, it is 2 kids writing pen pal letters to each other. And there's a boy and a girl, and they're writing pen pal letters to one another. And it's kind of cutesy thing. And what I found out was they were originally signed to Geffen Records, and which was the same record company that put out Nirvana's stuff. And Pen Pals they wrote from a box of fan letters from all across the world that was written to Kurt Cobain. And so when you listen to that track, all the lines and all that stuff are directly from fan mail of fans writing to Kurt Cobain. And so I did not know that. And so when I was listening to Pen Pals this week, I was like, oh my gosh, when you listen to it and put it in that context of, oh, this is all stuff, they literally cut and paste the lines. This is all stuff written to Kurt Cobain back in the 90s. And so I thought that was hilarious that they did that. But when you listen to the track, it really works. It's a really fun track. But again, this is a band that I've saw at Lance Blues. I saw them at the Loop. I've seen a number of times, and their live show is absolutely incredible. And like we're talking about with Rush, where they're all proficient. These are guys who are not just proficient at their own individual instruments. These are guys that are proficient at all 4 instruments and vocals and vocal harmonies. And that really comes out in their live shows. They are really great. A friend of mine from my high school days, Tim McCready, who lives in Toronto, actually is friends with Jay Ferguson and performs with him. He has a band up there, and he performs with them. And I see him pop up in his Instagram feed all the time, and I'm like, whoa, that's so cool that he gets to play with them and is friends with them. But just a little fun thing there, but which I'm obviously jealous about. But yeah, it's that is my number 1, Sloan.
It's great.
Yeah, you do see the good in everyone, don't you, AJ?
It's true.
I had to make that pun. Obviously, that was the theme for the George Stroumboulopoulos' show on CBC for years. But yeah, I can't blame you 100% for Sloan. They're a Canadian original. They did try to actually get into the United States market in around the early 2000s with the Billboard Heat Seekers chart, which is kind of for bands that aren't necessarily highly promoted by record labels.
That was one of the things. They left Geffen Records because they weren't getting the love at all. Geffen kind of gave them the screw job, and so they were really pissed about that, and actually broke their contract to get out of it, because they basically were like, Geffen, you're not not handling us well.
We'll talk about more David Geffen BS later in a couple minutes, but yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
not the first person David Geffen had a feud with.
Money City Maniacs is like the track that really hit the big time for them across the airways, and obviously, if we played Money City Maniacs, you'd recognize it just from the opening sirens that have it. It's great. They're a great band, and they really again same thing as Arcade Fire. They really get the crowd into it. There's a couple tracks there that have the hand claps. I love hand claps during songs, especially when you're in the crowd. You can do the hand claps. Fun stuff.
Cool.
All right,
Scott, what's your number one?
Number one.
I'm trying to think how to really set up and segue to this guy. Megastar, guys. Anyone who knows me knows he's, short of Kanye, he's my number one right now, guys. If Drake was the king, he's the hottest thing in music right now. He's hot off 5 Juno wins last week, bringing his total of his very short, 9-year career to 15 Junos, a whole number of Grammys, and 1 killer halftime show. And I, of course, am talking about The Weeknd. So with that, The Weeknd by far, he's a guy I was day one on. I've talked about this before. The Weeknd, when I first heard the House of Balloons album on the promo for the final season of Entourage, they used High for this and changed my life, blew my mind, and I have been a day one fan of his. Not an album goes by that I don't hear within the first weekend that it came. Certainly his 4 studio albums I have purchased or downloaded now that After Hours came out last year. The day they come out, he's must listen to, he's must see, and he's one that I go back to continuously. Like I said, he's by far the biggest name in music currently at the moment, and his tour is kicking off next week off his what feels like 3-year After Hours album, which came out March of 2020. It was pretty much the song, like the album of the pandemic. It was everywhere. This song included Blinding Lights, which spent the most time at number 1, which broke a record on the Billboard Top 100, as well as doing the halftime show, winning more awards this year, kicking the tour off next year. I'm like, man, I don't think anyone's ever milked one album more than Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd, has with that. And fun fact, where he got his name from was dropping out of high school at age 17. The old story was that he told people that he left for 1 weekend and decided to never come home. And his lawyers told him to drop the E to have no copyright infringement on the Canadian band from London, The Weeknd.
That's right.
So
yeah.
That's where you get it from. It's The Weeknd ND. So we'll get through a couple of his albums here. Like I said, the trilogy is an encapsulation of his 3 mixtapes. But then once he started going from Kissland, Beauty Behind the Madness, Starboy, and After Hours, and he's just been peak right now. After Hours at this point, in my opinion, is probably his highest peak. He's coming off working with the Sad Few Brothers on Uncut Gems, brought their aesthetic in, and they consulted on the whole storyline on the music videos. Very far out, very dark stuff. If you have seen his recent videos, it's very edgy and out there as far as like his descent into madness. And he's kind of going and he's really leaning into being like pop's Joker. That's what he's really emulating, is kind of just like a madness and chaos in the After Hours album, between Blinding Lights and Heartless and After Hours, the song itself, and a multitude of other things. And like I said, his halftime show this year was electric. It's something I go back to and watch on the regular. If I need to kill 15 minutes, it's definitely at the top of the list of what I would watch, just how he segues from his whole mixtape, House of Balloon stuff into Blinding Lights. Incredible. So with that said, we'll go through my top 4 Weeknd tracks. I am going number 4 is The Hills. Number 3, his title track off of 50 Shades of Grey, for which he was Oscar nominated, earned it. Number 2 that you just heard, his most recent hit, Blinding Lights. And as I mentioned at the start, High for This. Very, very minimalist, very toned down. You don't really get that kind of The Weeknd anymore, but that's fine. He's just, in a way, unlike Bublé that took a rapid turn and kind of became something else, I feel like The Weeknd has just evolved and incorporated different things, and you can still see the threads of the same guy. So for that, and the fact that he is, you know, at this point, as I said, must listen to when he releases another album, which I think might be soon, even next year, because he just said the after hours are done and the dawn is coming. He just said that at his People's Choice speech, and people are like, "Oh, does that mean more music? The dawn, something like that." So, like I said, that gets the internet excited. So, anyone who knows me knows my top guy currently in music right now is The Weeknd. So, Canadian artist born in Toronto, had to be The Weeknd.
Cool. Yeah, I think I've told this on a previous episode, but my buddy Steve gave me the CD for House of Balloons and said, you got to check out this track because it had sampled Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah, I know. We guys saw the fun. That's funny.
And so I was like, oh man, that's pretty neat. So I really dug that. Kind of like he had the indie R&B thing going, and so yeah, it was an album that got into pretty quickly. And then, you know, he went off on the pop tip, which is fine. And then, like, I don't dislike any of the new stuff. And, you know, he's definitely got a knack for earworms lately that are, you know, get in your head and unstoppable, and not in a bad way. Like, I don't want to say that there are earworms that you hate in your head, and there are earworms that are like, hey, I don't mind this. This is great. And he's one of those guys where he's just got a knack for a great melody and great, you know, pop music, which is fine. Like, yeah, he's definitely one of the artists, one of the top artists in the world right now, and for good reason. And he's one I don't mind. You know,
go over and watch YouTube any of his live performances. Watch his last one when he was singing from the top of a sunroof on a limo. It's like there were Hummers and stuff going all around at the end. That was at the People's Choice Awards, I believe, as well too. So he just puts a lot of effort and a lot of time. And like we talked about at the Super Bowl, he paid $7 million of his own money to pay for all the other dancers who were all bandaged up with the lights. He paid for all of them because his vision was that bombastic. And he's just a guy that puts a lot of time into his craft. I don't think he ever phones it in.
Just great, for sure.
So, Jim, bring us home.
Jim, I you already alluded to where this is going, and I like it.
Absolutely, because obviously, AB, I mentioned as an honorable mention for me was your number one. Yep. One of your honorable mentions is a number one for me, and it's the man who created this ditty back in 1972, if I'm not mistaken. Was it 1972 or 1971? Not sure. It's an epic album. He's an epic guitarist, epic singer, epic Canadian, and probably on the Mount Rushmore of folk rock and roll. It's Neil Young, two-time inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He went in solo in 1995. He went in 1997 with Buffalo Springfield. Order of Canada member, contributed to 2 number-1 albums on the Billboard 200. This one right here, Harvest. The other one, I believe, is Deja Vu, which was with the supergroup Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Yep.
And also founded both the Farm Aid Benefit, which was actually an offshoot of the Live Aid Benefit, which was to help farmers and help the farming costs, because there were a lot of foreclosures for American farmers during the 1980s. There was a huge crisis. There's still an ongoing crisis, but Farm Aid provides relief and benefits and helps farmers pay for their mortgages, which is a really great cause. Absolutely. In the United States. It's been going on for, God, I think 34 years now. And he plays that concert every year. And one show that he always played, they've ended the benefit concerts for it. It's a school that he founded with his wife, the Bridge School, which helped his son who had developmental disabilities. And it's a school that provided aid to developmentally disabled children in California. He, along with several other artists that he inspired, Pearl Jam used to play. Tom York from Radiohead was a very popular member of that group. Foo Fighters played that concert several times. These guys did not get paid. The benefits all went to the school. It was a non-for-profit school, so it was a great initiative that he and his late wife created. And then the music that he created, obviously Buffalo Springfield, for what it's worth, is obviously a quintessential 60s hit. And then just the list of hits that he had with both solo and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Ohio, Cinnamon Girl, Heart of Gold, Helpless, Southern Man, Rockin' the Free World. One of my favorites is Cowgirl in the Sand, which is a 10-minute epic with some of the finest guitar playing that I've ever heard. It's my favorite track. I didn't mention it here because it's not classified as one of his big charting hits, but it's definitely if you want to hear Neil Young at his finest for guitar work, it is. And then to talk about what we did earlier about David Geffen, one of the more interesting stories in rock and roll history was his feud with David Geffen. So after his successful period in the 1970s, Neil Young signed with David Geffen for a very lucrative contract. I think it was a 5-album deal in the 1980s. And this is a period where Neil Young wanted to go a little bit more experimental. Mm-hmm. So he tried to go with a country record called Old Ways, if I'm not mistaken. Geffen denied it because he wanted to hear a rock and roll record. So to spite David Geffen, Neil Young creates a backing band and plays a rockabilly record called Keep On Rocking, if I'm not mistaken. That's the record. Yeah. And David Geffen got really pissed off about it. Then I think before that, he also recorded an electronic record called Trans.
Which is great. I love Trans. Obviously, electronic guy, right? People bag on that record. I'm like, man, Trans is freaking great.
But the problem was that everyone wanted him, or people in the A&R industry wanted him to record another one of these, Harvest. Yeah. And sometimes you can't do that, right? I mean, you want to try to evolve your musical.
You get interested in other things, right? You just like
absolutely. You can't just adapt or die, evolve or die sometimes. So Geffen actually sued him because he for making music unrepresentative of himself was the charge. And
great. What a loser.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe they sided in favor of Young. He eventually got to make Old Ways. They patched up the rift, but obviously Neil Young left Geffen Records after that spell. And then he comes back later on and does some of his finest work with Harvest Moon and Keep On Rockin' in the Free World later on in the late 80s, which, maybe it was despite David Geffen after all those years of acrimony, but he came back and he came back strong again. And he is a true icon of not only Canadian music, but music in general.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like he's one of those artists when we talked earlier about, Canadian artists that broke big in the States. I mean, a lot of people didn't for years and years. A lot of people didn't even realize he was Canadian when he was with CSN. Like you're like had no idea that he was Canadian, and so that just speaks to the fact that his music speaks to not just Canadians but worldwide, and he had that voice where he spoke about people that were hurting. One of the tracks that I love is the Needle and the Damage Done. It's kind of a response to all these musicians and famous people that were dying at the time of drug overdose, and you saw a lot of his peers that were dying off, and so it's a great track. One that really stands out for me.
Very sad acoustic track. It's only 2 minutes long, but it is beautiful. I saw you knocking at my cellar door.
Yeah. There you go. And so thankfully he played that live when I saw him at the WCU Center. And he also played, I'm going to play, you didn't have any tracks there, Jim, so I'm going to play your track. This is my favorite track off of his Cortez the Killer, which he played live. You talked about your epic song. This is a 7-minute song. We're going to bring it out. But Neil's going to take us out. And so, we had a great time tonight talking about our Canadian artists. Hit us up in the comments, the comment section, and tell us who your favorite Canadian artists are. Let us know who we snubbed, who we didn't put on there, who should have been on there, and how many Juno Awards they won. Guys, this has been a blast.
Absolutely. And happy 150. happy 154th birthday to Canada.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, things aren't going necessarily great in this country right now. There's a lot of sad stories. Hopefully this is one of the more positive things that we can do to kind of celebrate the country.
100%. That's great. Well spoken. It's music. One of the things that we love about this country, and the people, like I said at the beginning, the people are what makes this country great.
Absolutely.
And there's no other country I'd want to live in than Canada, even with a bunch of crap going on.
Yeah.
All right.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Guys, take care. Like I said, check out the comment section. Hit us up. Check out the website, Mack Flash. Check out the YouTube channel for trivia stuff going on. And we will be back next month with another topic. And hope you join us for then. Good night.
See you guys.
Hey.
Canada.